Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Nick Harper and these are the headlines. The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Joe Biden have no plans to meet for the time being. The US government says that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is immune from legal action over the 2018 murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Swedish officials confirmed that the September blasts, which destroyed sections of the Nord Stream pipelines carrying gas from Russia to Germany under the Baltic Sea, were acts of sabotage. UN climate talks that were supposed to end Friday were extended by another day as negotiators seek to break a deadlock over creating a fund for nations hard hit by global warming impacts. And FIFA and Qatar banned beer sales around the 8 World Cup stadiums in a stunning policy U-turn just 2 days before the start of the tournament. There are mounting concerns in the US and Canada over Chinese police hubs and people allegedly spying for China. In the last few days, alleged spies have been caught, accused of stealing sensitive information and passing them to entities in China. The FBI director has also spoken about the so-called Chinese police stations in the US, which according to a report are part of Chinese surveillance inside the United States. Well, let's first talk about Canada. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police has charged a Chinese-origin man, Yuesheng Wang, on 4 offences, including espionage. The 35-year-old employee worked with the Hydro-Quebec company in Canada and has been accused of sending trade secrets to China. Wang is also charged with unauthorised use of a computer, breach of trust by a public officer, and obtaining trade secrets. And he's set to appear in court on Tuesday to face these 4 charges. According to authorities, the crimes were allegedly committed between February 2018 and October 2022. The officials also revealed that Wang published academic papers and filed patents in connection with the Chinese universities without the permission of the company. In the United States, a Chinese intelligence officer was sentenced to 20 years in prison for stealing technology from US and French aerospace firms. The person, identified as Zhu Yangjung, was accused of stealing commercial secrets from GE Aviation, one of the world's leading aircraft engine manufacturers, and from France's Safran Group, which was working with GE Aviation on engine development. Earlier this month, a federal jury in Cincinnati convicted Zhu on all counts: conspiracy to commit economic espionage, conspiracy to commit trade secret theft, attempted economic espionage, and attempted trade secret theft. These 2 developments come amidst a report suggesting that China has established dozens of overseas police stations as part of Beijing's crackdown against dissent. The report by the European agency Safeguard Defenders says that China has established at least 54 police-run overseas service centres across 5 continents. These centres were also established in 9 countries where Chinese nationals are no longer allowed to live without good reason. And for the first time ever, the US has acknowledged the existence of these Chinese overseas police stations in the country. During a Senate hearing on threats to US homeland security, FBI Director Christopher Wray was questioned on the Chinese police stations in the US. The FBI Director said that he is very concerned about the situation.
Well, Senator, like you, I'm very concerned about this. We are aware of the existence of these stations, and we've had now a number of indictments that you may have seen of the Chinese engaging in uncoordinated quote-unquote law enforcement action right here in the United States, harassing, stalking, surveilling, blackmailing people who they just don't like or who disagree with the Xi regime. And so it's a real problem, and it's something that we're talking with our foreign partners about as well, because we're not the only country where this has occurred.
US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a trailblazer and one of the longest-serving politicians in America, has decided to step down from the House leadership role. Pelosi, who served 2 terms as Speaker of the House, said she will remain in Congress but will not seek any leadership role.
Continue to do as a member of the House, speaking for the people of San Francisco, serving the great state of California, and defending our Constitution. And with great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hour's come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. And I'm grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility.
Pelosi made the announcement a day after the Republicans secured a slim majority in the chamber following last week's midterm elections. The outgoing US House Speaker received cheers from her fellow Democrats, with most of them saying Pelosi will be remembered as the most impactful speaker in the history of the United States.
To Nancy Pelosi, my dear, good, and close friend, thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for dedicating your life for public service. Thank you for teaching us so much. Thank you for inspiring us all. It's been the honor of a lifetime to work with you.
I will always think of her as someone who embodies the spirit of the Democratic Party of trying to serve the people and maintain hopefulness and optimism about what America can be, at the same time that she's very tough-minded about making it happen politically and understanding that there will be vested special interests that are trying to stop you at every turn.
Meanwhile, Hakeem Jeffries, a Liberal congressman from New York, is the frontrunner to replace Pelosi as the leader of the Democratic Party in the US House of Representatives. If elected, 52-year-old Jeffries will be the first black and non-white Democratic leader in Congress. The leadership elections are scheduled to take place on November the 30th. Well, to get more on this, our correspondent Susan Turani is joining us live from New York City. Susan, first let's talk about Nancy Pelosi. She's loved by Democrats, hated by some Republicans. What kind of an impact do you think she's had as the Democrat leader of the House?
Yeah, you know, Nick, the saying in Washington goes that Nancy Pelosi led Washington with an iron fist but a velvet glove. Her opponents would say iron fist and iron glove indeed. And while not everyone agreed with her policies for sure, Republicans might want to learn a thing or two regarding her leadership style, considering the fact that just before the Republicans won the 2022 midterms, she also governed with a slim majority and managed to get not only the Inflation Reduction Act passed for President Joe Biden, extremely unpopular among many Democrats within her own party, but also that infrastructure bill where, if you remember, members of her own party, the so-called squad, the progressives, wanted to tie it into a $700 million Social Security spending, $1 billion, tie it into that as well, and she just stared them down and got that bill passed as well. These were not easy feats, so bringing together her party was really her expertise. And now that Kevin McCarthy is the majority leader, will likely be, I think many Republicans, despite the fact that they really did not like her, especially during the Trump years, they really saw her as a petty partisan. Remember, she did rip up President Trump's State of the Union address. She was at the forefront of impeaching former President Trump on 2 false pretexts. But many are saying that when bringing her own party together, she was very instrumental in doing that. And then, of course, during the Obama years, passing Obamacare, despite the fact that she did, Obama did get that quote unquote shellacking after the passing of Obamacare, but it seemed like they didn't really care about that. So yeah, influential, as President Biden said, a consequential House Speaker indeed, but everyone definitely does have an opinion about Nancy Pelosi. And she is going to stay in Congress representing her district, by the way.
Susan, thank you. I'm going to ask you to stay there. We'll come back to you in a few minutes' time when we get to our next story. The Republican Party's narrow win in the House is poised to transform the agenda in Washington. This will empower GOP lawmakers to pursue conservative goals and challenge the policies of President Joe Biden. Republicans have made it clear that the top priority for their new majority is investigations into the US president's son, Hunter Biden. According to Republican lawmakers, the inquiry would focus on overseas business dealings of Hunter Biden. He's already under federal investigation, but so far has not faced any charges. Apart from this, other GOP priorities like border security, defunding the IRS are also expected to be on the fast tracks. But according to top Republicans, US President Joe Biden is also involved in his son's business dealings, including his term as the vice president during Obama's office.
Whistleblowers describe President Biden as chairman of the board for these businesses. He personally participated in meetings and phone calls. Documents show that he was a partner with access to an office. To be clear, Joe Biden is the big guy. This evidence raises troubling questions about whether President Biden is a national security risk and about whether he is compromised by foreign governments.
But after the not-so-fruitful midterms for the Republicans, they are still without a decisive mandate from voters. And this complicates plans to aggressively take on the Biden administration. However, Joe Biden has said he's never spoken to his son about his foreign business. And until now, there are no indications that the federal investigation involves the president in any way. Well, we're going to turn to Susan Tarani, who's still live for us in New York City, to get more on this. Susan, investigations clearly going to be the priority for the Republicans. How do you see all of this playing out?
Yeah, so the soundbite that we played was from Representative James Comer. He's the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee, and he will likely chair this panel for the GOP majority. He's long been preparing for this hearing on Hunter Biden. He made clear that this is not a Hunter Biden hearing and investigation. It's regarding the President of the United States, Joe Biden. And this is just a small percentage of the investigation that the Republican Party wants to carry out. They made clear that these investigations are to determine whether or not the President of the United States is a security risk and if he's compromised when he has interactions with world leaders, and that the American people have a right to know that. So they've been preparing for this for months. On the one hand. On the other hand, when the opposing party takes control of the House, one of the things that they generally do is oversight, and investigations are not uncommon. So we will see not only this incident, but also the faulty withdrawal from Afghanistan. We've already seen the border crisis issue, and I think the Republicans said that they can walk and chew gum at the same time, while also setting up an agenda on how to reduce government spending and take care of other issues. But yes, they do have their hands full, but I think this was a priority from the very beginning, especially because they have this hard drive from Hunter Biden, and they want to get to the bottom of why 50 intelligence officials said that this laptop and this hard drive was quote unquote Russia misinformation, Russia intelligence, why the story was covered before the presidential elections in 2020. So, there are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of unknowns, and I think they feel like this is something that needs to be looked into.
Susan, thank you. That was Susan Tarani joining us live from New York City. Well, I'm going to turn now to Rina Shah, a political advisor and commentator and former Republican strategist, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Well, look, the Republicans making it clear that they want to investigate Joe Biden's son. It seems to be their top priority. What's your assessment of this decision to push ahead with investigations?
My sense is that coming out right out of the gate when they just won such a narrow majority in the House and announcing plans to investigate the president's son, that's not a good thing for the Republican parties. But for the Democrats, it actually makes them look better. It makes them look like the mature ones in the room, while Republicans are looking like they're petty and out for revenge.
Petty and out for revenge. I mean, we've heard the Republicans in the past say that if they had a strong majority in the new Congress, they would perhaps even go as far to start impeachment proceedings against the president. Only a razor-thin majority is what they've got. Do you see that this initial investigation could lead to even more serious investigations, potentially even into the president himself?
Well, I think any investigation that Republicans in the House to undertake will be very serious because they will be on the taxpayer dime. They will take some time. These investigations don't just start and finish in a matter of a month, for example. They go over the course of many weeks. They take significant staff time. I know that because I've worked for 2 U.S. House of Representatives members. And I can tell you that this kind of is a distraction from the regular everyday governing and policy making that requires the focus of members. Now, of course, Republican leadership is going to pick their most bombastic, their most sensational, almost actor-like types of members to be on these committees because what they feel Democrats did with the Select Committee on the January 6th attack that was formed last year and was broadcast in prime time to Americans, Republicans' number one gripe with that was that it was made for show, that it was a show trial. But I don't think that they would do anything differently. What they want to do is capture the hearts and minds of American people and convince them that the Biden family has engaged in some kind of wrongdoing and that the sitting president of the United States should not be in his post because he's somehow done something wrong. Now, this is very important. There's so far been no evidence of any wrongdoing by the president himself. There are talks of improprieties, inappropriate actions taken by the president's son, Hunter Biden. But again, nothing in a court of law. What the U.S. House of Representatives would do by starting these investigations are not criminal legal proceedings. They are simply proceedings that would investigate in order to make a referral to the Department of Justice, which is still controlled by Biden appointee Merrick Garland.
Rina Shah, political advisor and commentator and former Republican strategist. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, moving on now to Thailand and the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC summit, where scuffles have broken out between police and protesters who were demonstrating in central Bangkok. According to reports, Thai police fired rubber bullets to disperse the crowd. Around 350 people had gathered about 10 kilometres from the APEC venue where the summit is ongoing. A journalist who was reportedly injured in the left eye has been taken to hospital. The demonstrators were protesting about several issues, including the removal of the Prime Minister, Prayut Chan-o-cha, and the abolition of Thailand's strict royal defamation laws. They were seen throwing projectiles, charging at police and trying to overturn a police car, while police themselves advanced on them with shields and beat them back with batons.
เขาบอกว่าเอเปกเนี่ยส่งเสริมการค้าแต่ชาวนา ที่อยู่ที่มาเรียกร้องวันนี้เขายังแทบไม่มีกินเลยค่ะแล้วสรุปคุณส่งเสริมการค้าของใครคุณส่งเสริมการค้าของนายทุนหรือคุณส่งเสริมชาวนาของการค้าของชาวนาหรือประชาชนอย่างพวกเรากันแน่สรุปแล้วผลประโยชน์ครั้งนี้ใครเป็นคนได้
This comes amid the APEC summit where world leaders have gathered to discuss various issues, including the Ukraine war and rising inflation around the world. Well, in the Marvel world, Thor is widely feared throughout the 9 realms for his cruelty, his violent temper, brutality and his sadism. But the actor who plays Thor is currently dealing with some fears of his own. Hollywood star and on-screen Thor, Chris Hemsworth, is genetically predisposed to Alzheimer's. In an interview, the 39-year-old explained, and we quote, "It's not a predeterministic gene, but it is a strong indication. 10 years ago, I think it was more thought of as predeterminate," unquote. He's been told by medical experts that he is between 8 and 10 times more likely to develop the condition than the general population. However, doctors also say while the chances of the Australian actor developing the memory-stealing disease may be greater, he might be able to steer clear by maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Hemsworth made the revelation after undergoing a series of genetic tests. The results showed that his DNA carries 2 copies of APOE4, the strongest risk factor gene for developing Alzheimer's disease. It's a brain disorder that slowly destroys memory and thinking skills, and eventually the ability to carry out even the simplest tasks. The symptoms of Alzheimer's progress slowly over several years. Some of the early symptoms include forgetting about recent conversations or events, misplacing items, forgetting the names of places and objects, having trouble thinking of the right word, and finding it harder to make decisions. For Chris Hemsworth, none of these have begun yet, and he's keen to not over-dramatise his health situation. But the movie star is determined to safeguard his health and to get his children tested once they reach a certain age, believing that prevention is perhaps better than cure. We're just 2 days away from the start of the footballing carnival in Qatar, and as teams prepare for their opening games, we bring you all the off-field action and drama in the build-up to the marquee event. Poland's football team was escorted by 2 F-16 fighter jets in extraordinary scenes as they travelled to the World Cup in Qatar. They were given a high-profile escort in light of 2 Polish citizens dying on Tuesday after a stray missile landed in Poland amid the Russia-Ukraine war. The Robert Lewandowski-led side posted a message on their Twitter account thanking the pilots. Poland will begin their Group C campaign on Tuesday against Mexico and hope to reach the knockout rounds for the first time since 1986. Lionel Messi-led Argentina have opted to stay in student halls instead of the 5-star luxury hotels in Qatar. The 2-time champions are reportedly doing so to ensure that they can continue to enjoy their beef barbecues. Argentina arrived in Doha yesterday, and unlike their rivals, who are staying in some of the city's plushest hotels, they went straight to their modest accommodation in the student halls of Qatar University. The expansive campus of the university would allow them to organise mouth-watering asados, their traditional Argentine barbecues. The Netherlands, meanwhile, trained with a group of migrant workers ahead of their first match against Senegal. It's part of the Dutch Football Federation's push to promote human rights at the tournament. Head coach Louis van Gaal, a strong critic of the World Cup in Qatar, was all smiles while players posted for photographs before they enjoyed the kickabout. Similarly, the England team trained with a FIFA-selected group of migrants and gifted them tickets to their opening match against Iran on Monday. Qatar has come under heavy criticism for human rights for the death and treatment of migrant workers, especially in the lead-up to the World Cup. Well, that's it for today on this edition of WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Nick Harper, signing off. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back again on Monday. See you then.
This is Arab.